What if your biggest problem in retail right now isn't the technology, the economy, or even your customers' expectations?
What if it's you?
Our guest today, Louisa Loran, former exec at Google, Maersk, Diageo, and now one of the most sought-after executive advisors on the planet, says most leaders are mistaking busyness for progress and using AI to automate broken experiences faster than ever before.
She's got a name for what actually separates leaders who thrive from those who stall. And yeah, she wrote the book about it too.
The book is Leadership Anatomy in Motion, and this conversation, well, it's going to be uncomfortable in the best possible way.
Stay with us.
Welcome to the Retail Transformers podcast, part of the #1 indie podcast network for retail, where we break down the ideas, the leaders, and the bold moves reshaping the future of retail. I'm Ricardo Belmar.
And I'm Casey Golden. Today's conversation is one we've been looking forward to for quite a while.
We're diving into something that sits right at the intersection of luxury, leadership, and the reality most companies don't want to admit: the gap between what customers expect and what organizations are actually built to deliver.
Because here's the thing, everyone wants the margins, the growth, the loyalty, but very few are willing to rethink how their businesses actually operate to earn it. So today we're getting into what's really changing across retail, technology, and customer behavior. And more importantly, why so many transformational efforts stall, even when the strategy looks great on paper.
Our latest retail transformer is Louisa Loran, advisor to CEOs and senior leadership teams navigating high-stakes decisions, and someone who's worked across companies like Google, Maersk, and Diageo. Louisa has done the thing most executives only put on a slide deck. She's actually led transformation. At Google, she launched a $1 billion supply chain solutions business. At Maersk, she helped co-author the strategy that doubled the company's share price and pivoted it from traditional shipping to integrated logistics. And before all of that, she was building iconic brands at Moët Hennessy and Diageo.
She's a board member and executive advisor, and she's been named to the Thinkers 50 Radar 2026, which is basically the Oscars for management thinkers. Expect the people on it to actually have useful things to say. Her work focuses on what she calls leadership anatomy in motion. Not more theory, not more frameworks, but how leaders actually move, decide, and create advantage when the path forward isn't obvious. Her book, titled, of course, Leadership Anatomy in Motion, is less of a leadership manual and more of a mirror most executives probably weren't expecting to look into.
This is going to be a conversation about where the market is going, where companies are getting stuck, and what it actually takes to lead and transform when there's no clear playbook. Now, before we get into that, let me tell you about Retail Club, our sponsor of the Retail Razor Podcast Network. Join 2,000 retail leaders at the Retail Club AI Festival, September 22nd to 24th in Huntington Beach. Dive deep into how AI is reshaping retail while soaking up the sun at a fully outdoor beachside venue. Decision makers from retailers and brands can attend with free tickets and up to $1,250 in travel reimbursement. Head to retailclub.com to learn more and get your ticket today. Thank you to Retail Club for helping us bring you this podcast and the other shows in our podcast network.
With that said, let's get into it. Here's our conversation with our latest retail transformer, Louisa Loran, strategic advisor and author of Leadership Anatomy in Motion.
Louisa, welcome to the Retail Transformers podcast. We're really glad to have you here with us today.
Great to be here.
It's really exciting to have someone with your background to share your experience, career path, and insights on the show. So we are matchy-matchy, and let's get this fancy conversation going.
Exactly. And we didn't coordinate.
I know, right? Yeah, well, there you go.
We know what spring means.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Well, you've had a pretty unique path across luxury, logistics, and tech. I feel like we're still considered unicorns. But what pulled you into this space in the first place, and what's kept you here?
Well, yes, it does seem unique from the outside, but for me, I think there are some common patterns. I think for all of them, it was a matter of learning skills and capabilities and bringing these capabilities to where they were complementary to what was already there in the first place. So I said the earliest part of my career was built in Moët Hennessy and Diageo, understanding brands and consumers, and of course the world of luxury and understanding how to create a perception of both a product and a brand. And I grew up in a world of marketing and commercial businesses, but moved more and more into how does that actually make you run your business in a wider sense? How does it influence operations, supply chains, rewards, all these type of things? And then I moved to a world of operations in Maersk. It's a very highly values-driven company, of course, founded on asset optimization with ports, terminals, etc. But what I could see was that there was a huge amount of access to knowledge about global trade and about how to support customer supply chain. So those skills that I had could be significantly valuable to that business. And was fortunate to be there at a point in time where there was a need for exact that change and transformation. So similarly, when I then moved into Google, it was once again saying I had been responsible for digital platforms, digital businesses, et cetera, but seeing that from the inside and knowing how to create the bridge between a tech world and a more, let's say, traditional legacy world was hugely valuable for both sides. So getting on the inside there, building solutions, technology, data solutions, AI, et cetera, and running a global industry there, help actually create value on both sides again. So for me, what I have done throughout my career, irrespective of whether it's one or the other industry, is be curious about where does change happen and what's coming next. Make sure that it wasn't just, let's say, a pie in the sky, but quite structurally go after it. And for surely most effectively, find the courage within the leaders of the businesses so that they could pursue it and they could go after it and own it after I left again.
There's a really interesting way to put it, like how you mentioned how those leaders have to find the courage to really pursue that and continue down that path. It's one thing to set up an elaborate transformation and have the creativity to do it, but you have to sustain it and keep it going or it can potentially fall apart. So one of the things I like about, we mentioned in the intro, we talked a little bit about your book and some of the work you do as a strategic advisor. And I've heard you say that the real constraint right now isn't necessarily demand, it's leadership capacity. So I really want to ask you, what are leaders missing about the moment we're in right now? And is it a matter of overconfidence versus being unprepared, or is it something different?
Well, I think I've chosen to learn throughout my career to challenge my context, to challenge my thinking in that way, putting myself into new settings. But I do encounter time and time again that there is let's say, an industry narrative. We are best within this. Instead of actually saying, what are the additional perspectives I need to bring in? So I put myself not just in the shoes of my customers, but also my partners, my suppliers. So therefore, the let's say the chasing of where's the immediate demand today, what are the headlines telling me, is often creating an environment where people forget what they are best at themselves and how they actually make that relevant to the people around them. So I spend a lot of time with the companies I work with today, simply just be clear on who are you and who do you want to be in the future. And then
who are you?
Yeah.
Gets me every time. I'm like, it just came down to ridiculous things of changing your logo. I'm like, are you forgetting who you are?
Yeah. What are you trying to tell me with this change, besides the fact that you placed a new individual in this role who felt they had a need to make a difference, and therefore they changed the logo?
Like a font is not going to fix your business.
No. And I think especially in current time where let's say the movement across channels is changing, people have access to a lot more information, et cetera, that you need to be incredibly clear on who you are, or it will all be blurred and people will not choose you. And I think especially right now where there's such a huge degree of change in the world and trust is declining across every parameter, especially in the developed world. If you can't trust those you buy from or what you buy, you are simply not, let's say, making the most of that potential relationship with your customer.
Yeah. And I think that all it's really permeates from leadership.
Yeah.
Somebody who doesn't isn't obsessed with the brand, doesn't love the brand, doesn't have that affinity, I think it's really hard to work in some of these retail companies or just company today in general. If you don't have the brand affinity for the company and believe in it, you can feel that in leadership.
Absolutely. And I think also
all the way down.
All the way down, yes. At every single corner, in the basement, everywhere.
Yeah.
But I think what we're also seeing is that the change and the tenure of leaders is the tenure is going down now, and people are just being replaced.
Right.
Instead of actually saying, like, what is the legacy I am responsible for now, and how am I going to contribute to that? It's okay to say, I also expect in this tenure to look better on these parameters because I'm carrying this responsibility in this time. I need to prove these things. But you are a chapter in a book. You are not the book yourself. So I definitely see that the trigger happiness on implementing something to prove that activity instead of saying how I'm bettering this legacy and making it clearer for people to engage with. It is unfortunately something we see a lot right now.
Yeah. Do you see that often in the work you do with enterprises about, when you have, I don't want to say entrenched leadership, but, a very legacy leadership that's been around for a very long time versus organizations you go into where they just had a leadership change, and they're with intention, right? Looking to transform things, looking to change things and sort of disrupt themselves. Do you run into these extremes a lot, or is there a middle that you're often working with in between those two?
I think there are good cases and bad cases on both sides. It's not one perfect model, but I think it's the principle of, are you willing to unlearn? So if you come from the outside, are you willing to learn what's special about this business? Why do people choose to work there? Why do people choose to buy there? And what is it that you need to nurture? If you have been there for a long time on the inside, are you creating the environment where people can come challenge you? Are you making sure that the people that you hire to challenge you are actually not, let's say, dependent on your long-term revenue stream into their business so that they just create that ongoing dependency? So I think when I look at businesses, it's old or new, that same lens. And then I spend quite a lot of time understanding who are the change makers in this business. Every business has a passionate individual who just wants to challenge. I'm not saying they're always right or wrong, but there's typically some interesting spaces within what they challenge. Are they getting the right context to deploy their thinking into solving the problems? Do they get the right sponsorship? When do we notice when someone starts following them? Do we, for instance, reorganize the business so it supports our future strategy instead of our past strategy? There's a lot of let's say, transformative maturity you can read from who is in which roles and where. So if you're saying this is the new business, this is where we want to grow, but the person who has always been most respected stays in the old arm, you're sending mixed signals.
You're sending the wrong message. Yeah.
So why don't you go to that individual and say, what would it take for you to make that jump? We understand it's a bigger risk. It's a smaller revenue number, most likely, but is it because you don't believe that it's going to happen? In which case we need to have that conversation, and whether you have good considerations we need to challenge into the strategy, or is it because you don't want to be part of the future story of this transformation? So I quite quickly get to the individual motivations and mobilize people towards the change instead of just looking at it from a balance sheet.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we've also gone through the shift on culture where at the brands, nobody wanted to know. It wasn't safe to stand out. You kind of wanted to keep your head down and choose your battles. And standing out was not necessarily a great thing for your career. But now I think it is becoming more acceptable to be that challenger in a room and almost necessary. But it does take a specific leader to create that space that I need you at 100% or 110%. Don't shy away from things. But I do have to say, I remember so many people being like, you're crazy. You keep challenging and pick a meeting. You can't do all of them. But you have to have a level of confidence or power to know, like, you're not going to fire me. And if you want this done, I'm volunteering to do it.
Yeah.
But I think it's starting to become acceptable now. And now it's up for the leaders to have that change, that they can also too be that catalyst.
Absolutely. And I think you're right that sometimes actually it's a privilege of the younger generations to be the challenger, and the leader wants to be it themselves, but they have this amount of responsibility that they simply don't dare to. I mean, there's no doubt I've been a huge challenger throughout my career as well. But I've also learned, like, if I get a list of tasks, I do them and then challenge. It is not challenge instead of taking responsibility for what I need to do. No one wants that, because then you move the problem to someone else. But saying, I've delivered this and I've come up with a better way to do it in the future. And I spend quite a lot of time with younger people who are like, but. And like, you need to create the space for people to actually absorb your ideas, whereas otherwise you're just pushing the problem to someone else. But I agree with you that the courage to speak up is essential for change. But I think that we should never underestimate the need to define the context right, because people don't necessarily know what problem they need to solve. And I for instance, I'll talk about how at junior level, 100% of your specific issue, but it may not be the important thing to solve at current time. So as these middle management leaders, our responsibility would have at that point have been to say, I understand what you're saying, but my task is to connect it to this other function. And how would you use your great thinking in that? At the top level of the management, of course, what they need to do is say, I understand that you've solved a problem for me, but we're actually moving at a different pace now, reacting to a different problem. So help me understand how it suits into that new context. And I think the principle of not saying, thank you, I'm going to park you in some shelf because it's not solving my problem, but acknowledge the interest, acknowledge the capability of challenging, but give them the context where they can be relevant.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Luxury used to be more of a category. Now it feels like a standard expectation for everyone. And I know that everyone has not had a true luxury retail experience or brand experience. Right. So what's changed, and where did these new expectations come from? And why are so many classically non-luxury brands, why have they not caught up to just a level of service to try to meet any of these expectations? Yeah. Why is there still a disconnect? Luxury's been around for over 100 years. The recipe is there.
Well, the recipe, yes, but I think this is the point. It's not a matter of ticking some boxes. When I started my career with Moët Hennessy, the first couple of weeks I was there, I was sent to live in a castle in France and experience what it was to have that private chef. I was allowed to go to the cellars of Dom Pérignon. I was allowed to visit the cellars of the 100-year-old cognacs that I could blend into my own blend, so I could learn how that craft was actually so unique and so grounded in history and storytelling and all these things. I felt it. I experienced it. I got to fall in love. Respect. Sorry, what did you say?
I know you got to fall in love.
It's completely falling in love. Yeah. And you understand how every decision you make has to measure up to that level. And therefore, those who haven't, let's say, understood that every time they do something for these brands, they are either enhancing or diluting that picture, they haven't understood what luxury is. And another thing, I think, that to your specific question of what has changed, of course, with access to information, with social media, with, I'd say, filters galore, all of a sudden, things look accessible. We can travel the world on our phone. We can visit all these nightclubs that most people would never, ever experience. We can have a breakfast that looks like it's created by a Michelin star chef, when most people have never actually tried it. So they think they understand luxury because they've seen a picture of it, and they may be able to dream about it, but it's not the same thing as the scent, as the detail, as the smile, as the waiter's attire or anything like that. So I think that the accessibility has made people believe they could, but it's not the same thing as you can. So scarcity versus accessibility is the challenge that's going on right now. And I think also because there have been a lot of products that have done line extensions and said, actually, we need to grow, so we're going to make a perfume with our brand name on it. And people can kind of pretend they're in the world of luxury, but you're not. And many have moved away from that as well. I think we're also, of course, from a, let's say, more socioeconomic perspective right now, seeing that many of those who have touched the world of luxury are now being cut off from it again because of the financial situation. And people don't want that. So they kind of make something new and they put a badge on there and they say it's luxury, but it's not. So the heritage, the scarcity, it's in the know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to me too. There's so many brands that want to create that sort of feeling of a luxury experience, but to your point, maybe it isn't necessarily because what they're delivering isn't that entire experience. It's just that one aspect of it that tries to get their customer to feel like they're getting there or truly experiencing it. But I feel like sometimes even the brands that do that maybe fall into the trap themselves, that they now think that they are delivering that luxury experience because they've almost rebranded themselves this way. And so now the expectations change. They expect that they're going to get the luxury margins, but they haven't really invested in the true experience. So where do you, I mean, how does that disconnect usually show up? How do we get there? How are the brands getting there? And is there a decision or something that they hit along the path that sets them in the wrong direction for that expectation?
Well, I think it is like many businesses. At some point, you're like, oh, this is okay. I can get away with this. But too many of carving of the corners, study the picture in full. I'll give an example. So last summer, Luca de Meo became the CEO of Kering, the second world's largest luxury group. Well, I hope it's the second. It's one of the biggest, I will say that much.
Don't ever put those on a list numbered.
Respected, global, big, impressive, lots of famous brands, Gucci, The point being that he came from Groupe Renault, so automotive, largely known for mid-market cars. There was a huge backlash in the media saying, what does he know about luxury? He's not right for this. We need someone who's known it, etc. And in general, I would say that is probably a fair concern. However, I happen to have had the privilege of working with Luca when he was at Groupe Renault, and he is a very, very respectful person, someone who respects brands a lot. And what he did at Renault was go in and say, actually, what is it that this company has? And how do I protect what we're good at? How do I respect the fact that our customers can't afford luxury, but we're a mid-market brand? How do I understand what's differentiating? And how do I partner to scale all the other elements? So it's more a matter of respect than necessarily having spent all your life in a certain industry. That makes me believe that he will certainly be able to be successful there as well, exactly as he was at Renault. So it comes back to that legacy, respect, and responsibility, that you understand what you carry while you're there. That makes the difference. Whereas coming in and saying, I can cut more costs, I can get more reach, is not understanding that the game you're playing. And I would say again, to me, this is, I said, what I have chosen to learn with my career jumps from one industry to the other. The rule book of one industry, many people assume that it's the same across others. It is not. But what one can do is you can learn to understand what motivates that other industry and therefore become more relevant to it. It's not rocket science, but it creates, it demands an active repositioning of someone else's context to see how you can be relevant in that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's a great point because you have been working across the luxury space into logistics and of course technology with Google. What are some of the patterns that you see that are showing up that each one can learn from the other to make their this is better, that maybe is something most executives just don't normally see?
Well, I will say that the most important one is understand what are the motivations and where do they have their revenues coming from, and what are they trying to optimize for. That's, let's say, from a business perspective. But actually, some of this also is what became the foundation of the 4 behaviors that I put into the book that I published. So this was gathered across the learnings of all of my career. And in short, there are 4 behaviors that I have truly seen differentiate those who manage change and grow above their industry the best. And that is envisioning ambitiously, expanding with curiosity, steering decisively, and embodying with presence. And we can go through all 4 of them. But to answer your question, steering decisively is something you're typically very good at if you are a global legacy business. You have optimized, you have done global, local, regional, you have scrutinized your cost, you have visited your processes, you have done clear communication, you've gone through all of those, so you can steer quite effectively. Versus if you are in a tech environment, you have probably envisioned ambitiously by nature, because you entered the market with a dream, with an ability to say, I'm going to shape something new that isn't there right now, and I'm going to be relevant in a way that people didn't even know about before. A lot of tech companies are also great at expanding with curiosity. So Google is one example of this. It's an open business. It's a platform business. It's built on collective intelligence. We make everyone accessible and we can see what comes from it. So all the thinking of building microservices and having people create products that can later scale is very much of that nature. Interestingly, the 4th one, embodying with presence, I don't think is, let's say, special to one type of company or not. That depends really on exactly, do you know how you can be relevant in a future era as well? And some of the luxury brands are brilliant at this. They know exactly what did it mean to be classical in the 1770s? What does it mean to still be relevant today? And that is not about holding on to the past, but it is knowing what is culture today and what are the things that are supportive of my brand, but not differentiating. So in that way, I have, let's say, extracted these from different types of companies, and none of them are perfect. None of them are completely wrong, but it's my desire to inspire people to learn from each other and therefore be more successful.
Do you find that organizations in different segments, maybe apart from luxury, I mean, I would imagine they're going to have some of their executives will be stronger in 1 or 2 of those behaviors versus the others. But if you go back to a mid-market brand, for example, do they tend to struggle more with the 4th one, or is there a struggle somewhere else?
Well, I think, let's say, a mid-market brand would typically not be the ones that are envisioning ambitiously. They've seen someone else create the market and they're like, let me join. Yeah. Which is absolutely fine, but it just means that someone else is defining your ceiling. You cannot grow out of something if you have not, let's say, defined it yourself.
Yeah, if you haven't defined it, yeah.
Exactly. So they are typically there. And then some of them are very good at saying, I can stand on the shoulders of what others have built. And that's how I'm only going to differentiate here, but I'm going to partner with everyone else, and therefore I'm going to be a fast second. I think you can embody really well as a mid-market brand if you're clear in your proposition. But if your proposition is, I'm the cheaper alternative, or I'm the smaller alternative, etc., then you are not going to have that brand equity and that IP that means that you are future relevant and future sure. At the same time, I see a lot of businesses where leaders come in and they don't understand what it means for them to embody a change. So they write a strategy, they structure a team, they see these other KPIs, this is what we're going to do. And then they say, see you over there, like, go do. Instead of actually saying, what do I need to do differently? Let's say before, if it was a knowledge-based business, you may have been the smartest person in the room, and therefore you became the leader. But if all of a sudden the future world is such that your knowledge-based business is now an AI, then for you to become the leader of the future for that business. You don't necessarily have to be a tech person, but you need to understand that you grow by usage. You grow by other people learning with you. You have to let go of control. And then remember, if before you were the person that knew everything, all of a sudden you have to be the person that learns with people. That's a very different type of leadership style. So I see a lot of people not spending adequate time to say, okay, I've done the company strategy, but what is my strategy and how am I going to create a safe space, have a trusted friend, an advisor, whatever it may be, where I can go and say, actually, this is really uncomfortable. I worry I'm not going to be that person. What do I need to learn? What do I need to practice? And if it's not me, how do I still manage the business in a successful way where I can leave when I want to, not when I get told to?
I mean, it's always so true, right? Like we've mentioned before, people, regardless of how much AI. But, because everybody's racing into AI, and you've been quite clear, it's not technology. We agree. It's not the technology. Technology is like is becoming a commodity. It really comes down to the organization. So for AI to become a foundational use, I'm like, for the future of a lot of organizations, I think that's a lot of the narrative that's out there, is that this is foundation. What needs to happen internally to have a foundation built on AI when it makes everyone uncomfortable?
Well, I think that the reason it makes everyone feel uncomfortable is because they see this tool that can almost be better than themselves. And then they logically go, oh my God, then they don't need me. And that's also why we see businesses with 800 employees having 800 agentic work streams. Instead of saying, what does our business need to become? And how do we best build towards that, all of us? It may mean that some function, which before was 5 people, only has 1 contribution, and another one with 5 has 7 contributions. But if you build them individually out, then the only thing you're doing is you're hitting the wall faster. So let's say, for instance, before customer service, they needed to close a case fast, and sales needed to upsell. So one upsells and the other one says this was an amend to the booking and I'm going to cancel it. And then they just keep doing that all the time. Instead of saying, what is really our objective as a business? It is to, let's say, increase basket size, but also loyalty. You then say, okay, the ultimate outcome is the increased revenue. And we maybe start segmenting and saying who needs the help and who just wants a faster completion. So I would always say it's about knowing what as we said, your identity, where do you want to go, but working from a future back. And when I say future back, it is not about saying I have a crystal ball and I imagine exactly what the world will look like in 2 years' time. But it is about saying I know where I have value and where it could be relevant, and let's build from that back. So as a leader, it's about holding a space, but also allowing for contributions, allowing for people and coming and saying, actually, what I do today is not relevant, but I'm afraid to speak up because then I won't get my bonus. Well, thank you for admitting that. You are still meaningful for the business, and we are going to revisit how we reward people. So we're all shaping that future together.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to take a handful of people in the room to design what that vision is, because so much has changed and there's so many different types of capabilities, and technology is a huge part of it. And so it's the vision for the company. I don't feel like can really come from one person unless they are this wonderful unicorn, but it is more of a group project.
But I would also say, why would you want it to come from one person?
Right.
You can have let's say, almost like a guardian of the brand or something like that. Let's say, but that's more to say this is the core that we protect. But everyone should feel a sense of ownership and contribute to where you're going. I think that's why I'm very positive and excited about this, because it actually empowers an organization significantly more. It allows people to contribute on a whole new level.
Mm-hmm.
It does mean that it is very hard to say, this is exactly the outcome I expect from you and what I will measure you against. But it is easier to say, if we achieve this together, we should all feel very proud, and we will then separate with a reward accordingly.
Yeah, we've been seeing a lot of companies start doing a lot of their automation. A lot of it's back office, right? Supply chain. But there's a lot of automating broken experiences just faster. We all have our theories on why this is happening, but I'm not in it every day. Ricardo's not in it every day. Why does this keep happening? Are we that siloed that it just doesn't come up? Seriously, in 2026?
I think, you answered it yourself. The point, if you tell someone, here's a tool, do your job better, that's what they will do, right?
Yeah.
They will look at it from their very subjective vantage point with the information and knowledge that they hold today. So you need to set that different context and say, in this wider context, you four people, you may not have been close friends before, but you're all touching the same customer at different stages. We're buying cake for you. At the end of the day, you have come up with a better experience for them. And you need to all own the outcome together. And then we shape the journeys according to that.
Who owns that?
The leader.
I mean, is that leadership? Is that structure? Like, how far do you have to go up to start blending divisions or departments? Or
you have a very good point there. Because of course the top leader cannot, let's say the CEO of Walmart cannot tell that to everyone. But one of the challenges which exist in bigger companies, and even just in mid-size, is unfortunately often things get escalated to the highest level of incompetence, right? It's not that people are silly or stupid, they have different jobs. But finding the best solution on the ground, the virtual ground or the physical ground, is normally for the people on the ground, right? So also spending a lot of time saying it's not about the hierarchy. It's about saying who serves the customer the same way, and they get together across functions. So when I work with people on larger scale structural changes, we talk about what are the few change levers, not 50, if we can, below 5. So let's say, for instance, what are the customer segments? What are the future products? Some of these things that we all collectively agree on, they are part of the future. If we say, for instance, a customer segment and a customer journey, then let's look at that full customer journey and see who interacts at different phases. Doesn't matter whether one has a boss of a regional manager, one has a boss of an operations manager, but across that customer journey, we have a shared responsibility, and that's where we optimize. And then we allow people at different levels of the organization to talk to their peers and solve together. Instead of having it go up, wait 3 months until it's time on the agenda, and then come down and the world has changed in the meantime, right?
Right. Yeah, I feel like one of the things too that happens in those scenarios is that a lot of those, and maybe this, I don't want to necessarily say this happens at that mid-level, but sometimes it's only because it's what they're being asked to from above. And that's to focus really on the measurement and the metrics as the tool that defines how successful they're going to be at this. And I know you said before that the problem isn't really in the measurement, it's at mistaking that measurement as progress.
Yeah.
And are there some examples? I mean, do you see this often where companies are, in a sense, hiding behind the metrics instead of actually making the decisions they need to be making?
Absolutely. I mean, people feel so good when they're like, "Oh my God, my number's green."
Right. Exactly. Yeah. My dashboard is green. Yeah.
But what did it really do? And I think this is also where if you have taught people to worry about a number being green in the dashboard, then you haven't explained to them what the impact and value that they bring truly is. Maybe they've never met a customer. Maybe they have never understood the workload that they create for other people. So all these layers of the organization have the responsibility to say, this green number, what does it really mean? Because it may be that a red number is better for the business overall. So for sure, this sense of completion and gratitude that people get from a spreadsheet is a misunderstood comfort that doesn't necessarily drive the change. I would also say, because in any sizable business, setting an objective and measuring it is measuring past performance. What are the leading indicators of the future that you want to create? Those are the ones you should be rewarding. And thinking about what are the proof points of that direction that's most important. And this is not a long list. It is actually, we were able to create that experience that was able to increase the margin. Brilliant. Let's talk about that story. It may be a small number. What did we learn from it? What felt different? Why did the customer accept this higher margin? Was it actually the product, or was it the experience around it?
Right.
So a lot more storytelling about the learning versus the number.
Yeah. And I know you focus, you walked us through earlier on those 4 behaviors. And what I really find interesting with that is that it's kind of telling me that it's not as much about having more information and more data, which we, especially now with it, we hear so much about everyone needs the data. They need the data to be able to make the decisions. But what I'm hearing your message is really, it's not as much about what the data is telling you to make the decision. It's what's the behavior that needs to happen because of the data.
Yeah. So someone taught me this sentence once, and I have stolen with pride and used it multiple times since. So asking the question of what would it take to change your mind, I find hugely interesting. So going into a management meeting and people are really proud to show good numbers, it's reaffirming, and it's not really needed, because people should be accountable for delivering what they do. But wanting a change, then you need to actually say, what's the data I could bring to change your perception? And in many, many cases, it is not data that you will pull in additional reports. It is actually really, it's a matter of my competition is doing something that blew me away. And I need to understand what's our version of that. It's not say run faster and give me a bigger number. So asking the question again, what would it take to change your mind? And giving people to truly think about it before they respond. Because it's not an easy question.
Yeah. And that drives the behavior versus driving data.
Yeah. And I would say, especially also now where it's so easy to pull data, and people come and they're like, well, but the data looks good, so I should be fine. Well, have you really thought about what data you pulled and why it looks fine? I think that we get numbed by more data instead of saying, what is the data that we don't see? And what is it that enables us to make different decisions? Especially also in let's say, for instance, I'm doing quite a lot of work on global rollout strategies right now. The amount of attention that gets drawn to developed markets versus developing markets, and understanding the difference in culture and therefore difference in buying capacity around the world is huge. But that's not what the headlines tell us. So people wake up, they read their news on whatever channel they do, social media most likely, because that's what most people do. They go into the office and they say, it's terrible with these tariffs. We need to fill our warehouses so we can continue to deliver. Instead of actually saying, there are people right now in the world who are very, very happy to buy and they're growing. How do we make sure that we invite them into our family so we actually build more optionality into our business than what we had in the past?
It's definitely a moment where everybody says it's like the AI era, right? Which I get. I really feel like this moment has an opportunity to build so many better leadership, like a better leadership culture going forward, as well as everybody having permission to take the time to continue their own development. It's almost like that permission is mandatory in order to absorb the tech.
Yeah.
And that's permission that I think a lot of people haven't given themselves in the past. That it's not a professional development, it's not a personal development, it's not a leadership development, it's not a cultural development. It's to-do list, to-do list, to-do list, to-do list. And now that to-do list relies on your ability to lead in a new way for a new type of business, new type of people, and change a very old corporate culture of the standards and make this kind of put the time in this year to make these shifts.
Yeah, absolutely. But I also think we need to acknowledge that most of the leaders on top right now did not grow up in this era at all. They grew up in a different era. So some of them have spent a lot of time complemented with what they have. But it's also a huge opportunity for C-1, 2, 3 to say, I'll be a wingman. I'll help you out. I will carry the responsibility that you do, and I will complement you with these skills. So I agree with you. It's a huge opportunity, but it's one that exists at all levels. We should not sit and wait for all the ones that are called CEO to change how the behaviors are, because they may not actually have the same, let's say, input that everyone else has. I also very much believe that this is a time where those who have the ability also have the responsibility to lean in, because especially with large language models, it's easy to level out everything. The floor is being raised, but the ceiling can also be lowered if you don't differentiate, if you are constantly critical, if you aren't aware of saying, actually, that's not how we show up in our business. That's not what I want to optimize for. You need to continuously steer that in that way. And especially also where right now we have a lot of people investing in technology, not just, let's say, from a corporate perspective, but also, let's say, their saving goes into the shares because the multiples are higher. But these tech companies do not have the operational knowledge that a lot of other businesses have. So do you really want the tech companies to shape all the agentic models, all the operational models, etc.? Or do you want to say, thank you for the technology, I will build it into what I know, and together we can go to market? We are seeing that companies like Amazon are building a lot of operational capability into their AI models, and a lot of the Chinese AI models are being brought closer to manufacturing and automation because that's their expertise. Why is that not the case for every single business out there saying, I will use all this technology for my non-differentiating areas, but the area I know, that's where I'm going to shape the market. I'm going to transform what I have now from an analog world to an AI world, and that's how I'm going to secure my future relevance.
Yeah, that's really where their opportunity is to take that leadership position, in the market.
Yeah, it is an exciting time.
What are there in that scenario, the example you just highlighted, right? Where why aren't they taking that operational expertise? Does that kind of align to one of the specific behaviors you mentioned before that's maybe missing for those leaders to engage with?
Well, I think it comes back to the very first one. If you are not envisioning ambitiously, if you are like, I'm very happy, I have 30 retail stores, we are growing, we are matching the market demand, that's what we do. You may be doing some omni-channel or delivery or something, that's how you're managing that. But what you could actually be looking at is saying, we know more about people's buying patterns than anyone else. That is our capability. It's not the store. Our capability is understanding what consumers need and translating that into goods on shelf. You can still sell goods on shelf, but that knowledge of reading the patterns of demand, that's your core expertise. So that for me is about envisioning ambitiously and not just being locked in whatever product you have today. If you envision ambitiously in that way, there is absolutely no reason why you can't first just internally capture that. You can bring all your employees to contribute to that. The model gets wiser and wiser and wiser. You can also say to some of your suppliers, do you want to contribute to the model? You can learn with us. We can grow together, but it's our model. You can say to your customers, you can subscribe because we can be a step ahead of you.
Right.
You can even have partners in other parts of the world say, we have this knowledge and you can use us. So you are still the core identity that you were in the past, but in a very, very different format that enables you to be relevant in the future. And I started saying, do it internally. I'm not saying give it away yet, but build it internally so you have that, and then start growing with it. Maybe over time, that is your core business. But for now, you have a responsibility to understand what it is, capture it, nurture it, and see where it goes.
If you're sitting next to a CEO of at a real inflection point, what would leadership autonomy in motion actually look like at that moment?
Well, I would go through the 4 behaviors. I would have a sense of what comes naturally to this individual. Is he able to envision, or she able to envision? Is he or she able to actually expand with curiosity? Do they create space for people to contribute? Do they have partners? Are they open to be challenged? These type of things. Can they do all those, but actually not communicate clearly and say, thank you, we tried this, we failed, we're going to go this way instead? Can they guide people on the next steps? Can they be honest about what their own, let's say, future expectations are and make the staffing ahead of time for that? And lastly, can they actually embody that change themselves? So I will say, in theory, you can staff for the first 3. You could say, I'm not great at them, but I have this wingman, and this wingman, and they sit very closely to me. But on top, you cannot staff for embodying the change. You can't, because then people won't follow you. They will follow whoever they will embody that change.
Yeah, right.
It's okay if that's a founder or an owner or a CEO, but then the list is done. It cannot be, it's my assistant, my comms person, or whatever it may be. So that's what I start with. I start understanding what their, let's say, awareness is, what their core skills are, where we need to grow, where we need to create something that either builds their personal capability or their organizational capability. Because this is not about doing a one-off exercise. It's about training these skills continuously. So once we've kind of done that exercise, I say to them every day, practice them. Every single day, you have to do something where you envision ambitiously, dream a little bit bigger. You create something where people can input. You make a clear prioritization of messaging, and then you show how you've grown. Because if you practice those every day, I practice them every minute, every hour, then when the big change comes, it's not dangerous. You're not afraid of change. You're very comfortable with change.
Right.
And that I can see grows people throughout. And as I said, I've seen great leaders who have been able to grow ahead of their industry simply by these repeated patterns, because they are able to raise above and move faster.
Yeah. Are there, when you're working with an organization and leaders in that manner, I mean, are there particular flags or warning signs you see that say, oh, this is why the transformation isn't happening? This is what they can't get past?
Lots. I think the hardest one for most people is to be open.
Yeah.
Expanding with curiosity, being open when it has been your entire career to have the answers. And now I'm telling you, you can't have all the answers. You need to be curious about what other people have of answers.
Yeah.
That, I would say, is
and you have to be comfortable with that.
They need to be comfortable. They need to know what they need to unlearn. They're like, I have the answer. I'm like, but really? Well, that was true in that context. Now you have a different context. Is it still true? I'm not
Can it still be
saying
true?
Everything out, but just be open to the fact that it may not. So this ability to feel comfortable with a direction, a responsibility, but not a complete final set objective, that's definitely the hardest part. So we practice that quite a lot. But I would say it's a bit like when you have kids and you watch them do something that you know you could have done faster, but you feel much more pride. That's how I feel with them. That's how they feel with their organization. It's that sense of, oh my God, we got further because I created the environment for these individuals.
Right. So for any leaders who are listening right now to this discussion there, and they're feeling that pressure to evolve, what would you tell us sort of the first uncomfortable shift they need to be willing to make this quarter? And what would be what would you tell them the cost of not doing it is?
I think right now there is a lot of numbness in general. So I think we touched upon it a few times. Be very aware of what you're great at. Stop hitting yourself over the head all the time. Find that thing that you are great at, and then bring that to work, to home, to everything more. So instead of what they need to do differently, just start with that positive affirmation, what you can actually do. Then I would say, secondly, is the being open, be curious.
Yeah, curiosity.
if you want to get it into a rhythm, I would say the 4 behaviors. But if you say one thing, know what you're great at and bring that. Don't bring everything else.
That's great. It's a great point.
Some of the loudest leaders in the industry right now, whether it be on tech or on retail, aren't necessarily winning me over these days. In your opinion, who's winning right now? Like, where are we looking to?
Yeah.
I feel like so much is like so radical.
Yeah.
And I'm like, where's a strong North Star right now? Is there somebody that stands out to you where you're just like, props?
I wish I could give you. So I would say I completely agree with you. Right now, unfortunately, even many of the great leaders are not showing up. I think that there is an innate amount of pressure, and some of the rule books are being questioned at current time. I am a firm believer that let's say that the new form of leadership will still prevail because we are seeing more challenge, more disagreement. But right now, I think that collectively, these strong leaders are looking at how can we show up together, because right now the cost of standing individually seems to be very, very high. So that's, let's say, the meta message of I expect these great leaders to show up collectively. And
Great. They're in training at the moment.
However, I would say I get a lot of encouragement by meeting people behind closed doors because there's a lot of desire. There's a lot of willingness to do it.
Right.
There's a lot of intellect and hope and all these type of things. So I believe that our responsibility as you and me and so on is actually to say, how can we prop them? How can we support them? How can we make sure that they take this step and we are right there with them? Because it's not that hope is gone. It's not that intellect is gone. It's a matter of do I dare?
Right.
Yeah.
And well, that's very well.
Like that first person standing out looking stupid. It's only looking stupid for a few seconds if someone supports.
Right.
Those 6 seconds shorter is really what I am encouraging everyone to do. And I do see people doing good things, but it is not at the global scale that it should be.
Yeah, so it's very much a little bit about reaching further with that curiosity.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think also that there is a lot of not being deterministic with this. Learning from the AIs, it's saying, I'm just going to be generative. I'm just going to suggest and do a hypothesis. It's not about saying you are wrong and I am right. It's saying could be.
Right.
Could it be this?
What could be?
Would you want to join me in this? Our business could deliver this to you. Because that's also what we see in a lot of change, that someone goes out and creates a market and therefore others are willing to invest to grow it. Many industry interdependencies have come exactly through these conversations, not saying I will sign a contract, but if I do this, what will you do? And then together you move and you create new markets that are very, let's say, profitable for both parties. So that exploration, that hypothesis seeking, that has been at the heart of many, many industries, but not necessarily at the forefront of business the last couple of years, I think is what we're going to see next.
Yeah. Well, Louisa, this has been such an eye-opening discussion. I really thank you for spending this time with us and your audience, sharing all these insights and how leaders, as I say, really need to look in the mirror and kind of ask themselves, are they being curious enough, right? Are they exhibiting the behaviors they need to take the business forward, whether they're actively trying to transform or not even thinking about what they should be doing to go forward and to move into the next step and not be stuck in the past. I really wish we had a few more hours to spend on this. And I'm sure Casey would wish we could dive even deeper into luxury specifically, because Casey's always open for a luxury
When
discussion.
are you going to be in New York? I feel you.
Soon. Oh, no, I look forward to that. And fortunately, it is an ongoing conversation. So thank you so much for having me. And let's keep the conversation going, whether on this channel or others.
Yeah. I mean, I know our audience must have been taking massive notes during this discussion. I mean, there's just so many incredible takeaways and reminders. Things that maybe we need to set a couple of reminders throughout the month to just take stock a little bit on how we're, how we're developing and how we're communicating with our team and acknowledging where we are today and where we want to be, tomorrow.
Right.
If any of the listeners and viewers want to get in touch with you to learn more or even look for your help to support their strategy and transformation, what is the best way for them to reach out to you?
So, of course, LinkedIn is always there, Louisa Loran, or louisaloran.com has my information, contact forms, all of that. Or you could get started with the book. But I would say in many of these high pressure environments, it is helpful to have a specific context and say, what does it mean for me? So feel free to reach out.
Fantastic. Thank you. We'll include that in the show notes along with a link to your book.
Thank you very much.
Definitely recommend to everyone go out and get a copy and have it on your shelf.
All right, Ricardo, this is a wrap.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How much did you love this episode? Drop us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Good Pods, and hit that subscribe button so you never miss an update. If you're watching us on YouTube, like and subscribe before you go. I'm Casey Golden.
Follow Retail Razor on LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Threads, and Instagram, and subscribe to our Substack for highlights and bonus content in your inbox. For transcripts of each show and guest info, head to retailrazor.com. Retail Transformers is part of the Retail Razor Podcast Network, the #1 indie podcast network for retail. I'm Ricardo Belmar.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time, stay sharp, be bold, and keep transforming retail. This is the Retail Razor Retail Transformers.